That's where she had to go to get it. You ready to start? Welcome to the Ann Arbor Human Rights Commission. Denise, we want to start
Sure.
roll call.
The meeting will be broadcast live on CTN Cable 16, ATT Channel 99, and online at a2gov.org, watch CTN. Public commentary can be made in person or by calling 877-853-5247 or 888-788-0099. Enter meeting ID 996-9403-7874. Okay. Commissioner Cass,
Present.
Commissioner Meadows, absent. Vice Chair Gerber,
Present.
Councilmember Song, absent. Councilmember Ghazi Edwin, absent. Commissioner Pesmiser, absent. Commissioner Bond,
Present.
Chair Standby,
Present.
Commissioner Cowan,
Present.
Commissioner Winkler is absent. Commissioner Silva,
Present.
you have a quorum.
Thank you. Take a minute to look at the agenda. Are there any additions or changes that you'd like to make? We have a motion to approve the agenda.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Do we have our guest speaker? Okay. Oh, public comment.
Oh,
That's right.
anyone here for public comment? I don't have anyone on screen.
Okay. We have two presentations this scheduled for now, and we will move on a little bit so that we can wait for them to come. Approval of the minutes. We have a motion to approve the minutes.
So move.
Second.
All in favor? Oh, that's a discussion. These are January minutes. We did not have a meeting in February because of illnesses and quorum. Are there changes that you would like to make in the minutes? I propose one change on the second page where it says Human Rights Commission resolution to prohibit, and then it says gov issued ID. I'd like to make it real clear and just say government issued ID. Government issued. Anything else that anybody's got?
I move we accept the minutes as with that amendment.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Don't see anybody.
A brief point of procedure. Sarah emailed that she's trying to access the meeting virtually, but is having difficulty. I'm unsure if Denise could provide her the link as requested.
Oh, I didn't see her.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, well, then, We'll continue until we have notice that City Administrator Mahoney is with us.
And also, who are you referring to?
Sarah?
Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm gonna send it to her.
okay. You're going to send her the link.
Mm-hmm.
Good, so she can join us. I think we're also expecting Pam.
Okay.
But in the interim, and we were going to have a city council report. That was the next thing on our agenda, and we do not have, both of our city council liaisons are ill or incapacitated to come to this meeting, so we're not going to have that. This was going to be a very tight meeting, so we're probably doing all right. Aiden, I'm going to ask you then about facial recognition. We have not talked about that in a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. As we previously discussed, facial recognition and the hopeful alteration to our city ordinance in relation to facial recognition in the sense that it currently does not exist. We're hoping to have a proposal someday in front of council. Is currently being workshopped by our new city attorney with a focus with Lynn Song being a POC as well as Travis as the other POC. Moving forward from there, I need to connect with Lynn, who is not with us tonight, who should be and has already connected with our city attorney. From there, we're very hopeful that action can happen much more swiftly now that we are working with a new stakeholder. Additionally as well, I will say that there's been massive interest from across council in supporting such an effort. Additionally as well, there's still a very large public support as well. So we're hoping that those two things help very much put pressure on this in this instance. But I think that in the next meeting when Lynn is here as well, we'll be able to have a more substantive update.
Yeah. Do you think we'll have a chance to look at it as well? We're very interested.
That is very much the plan. So
Good.
I think moving forward, once we're able to draft language with the city attorney, the plan is to first put it forth in the Human Rights Commission, approve it if you are all so inclined, and then moving forward, we would then, with the recommendation of the Human Rights Commission, send it to council, and the expectation and hope, rather, is that it would pass there as well.
Thank you. That would be super.
Of
Thank you
course.
very much, Aiden.
And yeah, as well. And then in terms of collaboration in the language, I'm more than happy in collaboration with Lynn and other folks as well who are interested to draft the actual language, but with such considerations as well in terms of like the legal precedent and practice needs to go through the city attorney
sure.
probably multiple times, but know that I'm happy to lead the drafting as well.
Great. Follow up on HRC work. Complaints. Judah.
Okay, yeah, so we are tweaking our process for allocating and handling our complaints within the commission. Denise will continue to field the original ones, do what she does if it's someone out of jurisdiction, to try to connect them with appropriate bodies where they live, then send it on to us. So she'll be sending me the complaint and giving me a text because I never see emails. And then I will then either take it or I will allocate it to one of the other people who have been experienced with it. And then I will also, so if that person is unavailable, they'll let me know and I'll pick the next one on the list. And also at the same time, I will also find someone who's less experienced. So we have teams of 2 working on each one. And again, if that person is unavailable or available, they should let me know as soon as possible. Because if not, then I can go down the list. And so we should always have 2 people. So 2 heads are better than 1. You can confer. One person can take the lead. The other person can, anyway, they'll both collaborate. So that's the essence of it. I'll put it in writing. Linda is also working to revise. We have a checklist, sort of things that you do in processing complaints that we more or less try to follow. I mean, every complaint's different, but there's certain procedural elements that are in common that we try to follow. So Linda is tweaking that, and she'll send it to me, and I'll send that out along with sort of the outline of what I just said. And if there's any issues or questions, just let me know, or of course Leslie. But Leslie does so much, I thought, maybe someone else could do some of this. So, yeah. So that's what we're doing for now.
We are working, we're trying to become more efficient, more, as professional as possible, but get these things processed as quickly as possible, and that's always a problem for a group like ours, but I think we're getting better all the time, and this is going to make a big difference. Thank
Yeah,
you.
I think this is a massive step in the right direction in terms of efficiency. I think the calendar-based system was certainly inventive, but I think in this instance, just going off of general capacity based on the day-to-day or perhaps the week will be most advantageous. And additionally as well, I think that the pairing system will be very helpful because I would love the opportunity. Me and Judah, we could rock a case so well. So I think that would be a wonderful opportunity too. I'm very much in favor of this.
I like that. Okay. We do not have City Administrator Doheny, but we do have Heather Seifert.
Yes.
And perhaps we should begin with her presentation because we do have a fairly packed
The
agenda.
presentation is on your monitors. Heather, I can scroll the PowerPoint for you.
Okay, is it going to go to them also?
Yes.
So they get to see?
Can you hear us?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you. I can't see what you have up on the screen set though, so hopefully I'm not out of sync with what's being shown up on the screen.
I have the first slide,
Okay, great.
The title
Well, thank
slide.
you.
title slide, yes.
Great. Thank you for having me to this. And I'm sorry I'm not there in person. I wish that I could be there and meet all of you, but my schedule has been a bit of a scramble these past couple days, so I appreciate you accommodating me virtually. So basically what I wanted to talk to you about is the Equitable Engagement Initiative that we've been involved with for the past year and a half. I did this work as an employee of the Systems Planning Unit. I was a community engagement specialist as well as a planner. I've now switched over to the Housing Commission as the Director of Housing and Economic Development. So maybe perhaps I come back someday and talk about the initiatives related to housing, but for now I want to talk about engagement and the work that we were doing. So the overall goal of this, if you don't mind going to the next slide, is to really advance equity because the city government itself, as well as the community, states that we value equity, and having meaningful and just engagement processes is critical to advancing equity. So what we wanted to do with this is to develop a shared definition of what equity means, and then what policies, guidelines, and practices could be developed for Ann Arbor to be the inclusive city that we hope to be. So with that, city staff, if you don't mind advancing to the next slide, and it should be showing the demographic data. So with that, we did some pre-work, and this is actually data going back to 2019. So back then, myself and some colleagues decided we needed to understand our baseline of who was engaging with the city. So who was attending our meetings, who was taking our surveys. We had a general sense of that, but we wanted to get some data about that. So we started administering a demographic survey out to people. It's completely optional. We can't force people to take the survey, so not everybody at the events took the survey, but many people did, and this is what we came up with. So going from 2019, so the year before the pandemic, and then going into the pandemic. So all of our online meetings and as well as the surveys that we administered. And as you can see, the data shows that it's not really the people that were engaging with us, it's not really representative of the community. It doesn't match what we are, where we stand with our census data. So we're working to remedy that. So if you don't mind going to the next slide, which would be about staff education. So what we wanted to do before we started this work is really to ground our staff. And so this effort is a multidiscipline and multi-department effort. We didn't want it just to be in our department, which was systems planning. We really thought that this should be spread out through the entire city. So the Office of Sustainability got involved. We had Human Resources getting involved, our planning department getting involved, and then Laura Orta got involved once they came on board. Who else did we have? Our Office of Emergency Services came on board. So we had a number of people involved in this. And so we wanted to educate all of our staff where we're at right now. And so we looked at what we were already doing. So we looked at existing city practices and then local and regional conditions related to equity, and then started exploring what other communities are doing. So what are some of the promising practices that other places are doing to advance equity? To dive into our current practices a little bit more on the next slide, what we're doing currently is we have a community engagement toolkit, which has been around for about 10 years. So it's actually been in existence for quite a while, but it wasn't universally applied throughout our organization. What the toolkit offers is a set of questions for people to think through in terms of how to approach an engagement event. So how to scale it appropriately for what the topic is. Does it affect the entire community? Is it neighborhood based? Those are some of the questions involved. We looked at our demographic data collection. So what I just showed you just a moment ago. We looked at staff training. So in recent years, we've done some staff training where we've hired people to come in from the International Association of Public Participation to train staff on engagement. So essentially training people how to do engagement plans and to think through engagement. And this is something that started right before the pandemic happened, and so it was cut short a bit, but we hope to revive that as well. We have a youth engagement effort. So in the appendix of the report, if you've had a chance to look through that, that talks about our youth engagement effort that we did. That was actually a class that I ran, again, before the pandemic with community high school students to help students, youth, learn how to be civically involved, that they actually have a role to play in shaping their own community. I was hoping to expand that program to other high schools and to perhaps even younger ages, but again, the pandemic hit. And then we also have a developer public participation requirement, which seems that should just be a given, but actually Ann Arbor goes a little bit above and beyond most communities in requiring that. So we do have a number of things that we're already doing related to engagement, but of course there's always room for improvement, and that's what we sought to do. And the next slide, and I can't remember if I left this in here, but there might be a slide on the engagement hub. Is that the next slide?
Engagement hub, yes.
Yep, and I actually want to get back to that a little bit later, so if you don't mind skipping that for now, I'll get into the steering committee, which is the next slide. So we really wanted to turn this process over to the community and really have the community drive this.
He looks frozen. Okay. Do you think it tends to be long-term, or that you'll need to reconnect with her?
Heather, you want to see if you can come back?
She's probably speaking. Do you think she doesn't know? What if you hang up? Yes, I think she's just.
Okay, she can come back.
Okay, while she's coming back, let me mention that Denise was kind enough to send around some information about the county advisory council on reparations.
Oh, here she is.
Okay, we'll get back to this.
All right, I'm back. Sorry about that.
Okay.
It's, the Zoom follies that we live with.
Yes.
We sent out flyers to housing commission sites. We actually sent them out through Meals on Wheels, so that's a new partner that we engaged with. We put it out through a community newsletter, email distribution list, through schools, so we worked with the schools to pass it out so kids could take it home to the parents, or we were actually looking for youth representatives as well, so people high school age and older could apply to be part of this. And we also created a video, a kind of a PSA thing that we worked with CTN to distribute. So we got 80 applicants, which was way more than we expected to, which shows really that this is something that the community is craving. We felt that 80 people, working with a steering committee of 80 people would be a little bit unwieldy for us. We weren't really prepared to do that. So we narrowed it down to 30 representatives. That was still a lot of people, but we didn't really want to cut it any further. We met monthly for about 1.5 years, and we started off with defining equity and our core values, and then developed recommendations, which I'll get to at the end. So the equity definition that the group came up with is here, what should be on your screen, if you don't mind going to the next slide. And what the group came up with is that equity is the fair and just practices that ensure all community members can thrive. Equitable practices acknowledge and address structural inequities, historic and current, that advantage some and disadvantage others. And that is distinguished from equality, which is treating everyone as if their experiences are the exact same. So from there, we really engaged in a shared learning experience together, and we reviewed, again, where we're at as a community, and we did this by exploring the opportunity index, and that's something that the county has put together. If you aren't aware of that, I'd love to share that link with you, because that really shows a mapping, giving a geographic distribution of where there's more opportunities than not. So we looked at the opportunity index, we reviewed our demographic data, we reviewed the engagement toolkit with the group for them to review and critique. We reflected on engagement efforts that the city was currently engaged in. So we did a review of the ARPA funding effort and the engagement effort that was involved with that, and the good, the bad, and ugly with that. We looked at land use planning, so we had our planners come in and talk about that and what's on the horizon for the comprehensive plan that's coming up. We looked at affordable housing, so we had Jennifer Hall come in and talk about that. We talked about city hiring practices. We talked about sustainability efforts. And then, of course, getting into the meaningful blocks or the building blocks of meaningful engagement. So on the next page, this is something that the group came up with that we didn't end up putting in the report, but I thought this was a useful analogy, that we really needed equitable engagement to create good footing to address these other topics, which are identified as the toes. So how can the good footing of engagement influence these topics? And so from there, I'll just cut to the chase and talk about the recommendations that the group came up with. So on the next slide, you can see our first recommendation. And the purpose behind this recommendation, which is demonstrate the city is committed to advancing equity, is because people who have been minoritized and marginalized will not engage with the city if the city is not representative or clearly committed to supporting equity. So I'll just quickly go through. Sorry, did somebody have a question? I heard somebody speak briefly.
No, we're okay.
No, we're on the right slide now. Recommendations?
Yeah, recommendations. Okay, recommendation 1. So under that is that the city intentionally hires minoritized individuals, especially in higher level positions. Number 2, create transparent and meaningful pathways for promotion of minoritized individuals. Number 3, appoint racially and ethnically minoritized candidates representing impacted communities' perspectives to boards and commissions. Number 4, city council adopts and enforces policies that ensures decision-making be equitable. Number 5, be authentic. 6, build trust and transparency through continuous outreach and relationship building. And then on the next slide is the second recommendation, which is provide both ample and targeted invitations to engagement opportunities. And the purpose behind this recommendation is that people need to be made aware of opportunities in addition to feeling welcome and valued at engagement events. And under this, we have translate and transcreate meeting notices and content addressing the most common languages first. 2, use non-digital ways of getting the word out. So again, going back to things like flyers, getting the word out through informal networks, actively recruiting BIPOC to participate in engagement events, and then 5, create an online engagement hub that is easy to find and easy to use. The third recommendation on the next slide is to provide the resources necessary for staff to conduct meaningful engagement. And under that, we have ensure a budget for community engagement and make sure that it is scaled appropriately to the issue. Number 2 is continue and increase staff training and conducting quality engagement. Number 3 is to continue to use and evolve the city's community engagement toolkit. Number 4 is to create suitable measurements and milestones for successful engagement. And on the next slide, we have the 4th recommendation, which is to make engagement events more accessible and attractive. And the purpose behind this is to have engagement events that are easily accessible, seem important, and that do not feel hostile, which has been deterring people from engaging. So number 1, hold hybrid meetings at different times, making recordings available. We have found since the pandemic that people are really actually liking the ability to come in through Zoom instead of having to come downtown, come to City Hall. It makes it a little bit easier for people. You can have your kids running around you. You can be eating. You can be in your pajamas. So people do like the hybrid meetings. Number 2, provide various ways to provide their input to avoid dominant narratives from taking over. Number 3, use and enforce ground rules that support honoring the dignity of individuals. And I'm seeing that some of the words have been cut off. I apologize for that. I can send a revised copy of this presentation to you. Number 4, hire trained meeting facilitators and moderators to create space to heal wounds. Number 5, clearly communicate the decision-making process, who makes the decision, and the level of influence the community has over the decision. And number 6, take time to celebrate and experience joy as a community. So those are the recommendations. And then looking at promising practices, again, this is the research that we put into to see what other communities are doing that has been successful and led to more equitable engagement. One of the big things is community liaisons, and that's something that we've already put a budget request in to do. So paying people to become liaisons as part of our projects, especially our capital projects going forward. And then measuring participant satisfaction. So always checking back in with the community to see how the process is going, how it went, what we can do better the next time. Using a mix of meeting styles, so not always the traditional town hall, but having different ways of engaging with people. A lot of people don't really like to come to a meeting where you have to come up to a podium. It feels very intimidating. So having meeting styles where the engagement is dispersed throughout the room, where people can go to different stations, and it's not just one person standing there talking and then passing the mic to the next person. The next one is having information kiosks throughout the city, so we're reaching out to all over places in the city, so really getting out to people, which is a lesson learned over and over again, that we really need to go to where people are at, not just expect them to come to where we're at. And one way to do this is having information kiosks around the city where people can just find information, perhaps take a survey at the kiosk. Doing surveys and polling, people really like our surveys. That seems to be an easy way for people to engage. Because it can just be distributed in a variety of different ways. And then our engagement hub. So this is what I wanted to dive into a little bit further. This is something that we're already getting started on. If you don't mind going to the next slide. So this is an example of an engagement hub. that shows a landing page where that presents to the public how they can engage. So it provides all the different projects that people can become involved in, as well as different volunteer activities and ways to contact the city. This seems like something that's really basic, but we don't really have anything like this in place that's as robust. What we envision is something that people can just go to and just have all the information at their fingertips about how to engage with the city and make it really easy for them. So we worked with a team of U of M students actually to explore this and look at the best practices from other communities on this. And then we're already making some revisions to our existing website. But what we hope to do is to hire a vendor to set up something like what you're seeing here on the screen, again, to make it very visual and easy for people to engage with. And that's really it for the presentation. I didn't want to take too much time on your agenda because I know that you had a tight agenda, but if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to go over anything in a little bit more detail.
Thank you, Heather. Are there questions? Are there questions?
Oh, yes, I actually have a question. This is Keita Cowan, Commissioner. Could you give me some context? I think I am confused. Is there a larger diversity, equity, and inclusion sort of program of which engagement, is one sector? Like, is there one that is examining hiring practices, salaries, recruitment, so one that's sort of internally focused on the organization? So that would be one. Then another one would be an impact assessment to see how historically Ann Arbor City policies and funding programs have impacted different communities. So, both of those sort of global assessments tend to be conducted, sometimes simultaneously with the initiation of the kind of efforts that you described, but it doesn't sound like that's happening yet, is it? Perhaps I'm just lost.
Well, yeah, no, it's on the horizon. So we do have our Office of Equity, which Laura Orta, if you haven't met them, was hired to lead that. And so they came on board as this was already in process, but I know under that office, they'll be looking at things like hiring practices and the organization in general and how we are advancing equity just as an entire organization. And this will eventually kind of fall under that. This was, it's kind of its own initiative, and it really came up from staff and some council members over a year ago that was really just kind of questioning how decisions were made and who was influencing the decisions. And so we wanted to just address that because what we found with our demographics, that it was the same profile of people that were coming to our meetings and really having a lot of influence, and not just the same profile, but in many cases it was the same people that were coming to the meetings. And so we wanted to find ways that would disperse that influence and really maybe even weight it the other way, to make it elevating the voices that haven't been heard in the past, and people that were most affected by projects. As far as the impact analysis, that has not been done to my knowledge. I think that would be an excellent thing to pursue. We know just very generally, and this is just from my perspective as a planner, we know some of the harms that planning practices have done in the past and how that has impacted Ann Arbor generally in terms of spatial segregation. But I don't think that anybody at the city has done a real impact analysis and looking at our policies in place and what has been the outcome of them over time.
Okay, so I remember reading, I don't know if other folks do, I think it was last year, a study done on the racial distribution within City Hall, city government. And I noted, for instance, that your group talked about land use policy right, like zoning, which I think is really right.
Yeah.
And I also remember that the planning department, right, I don't think has any, for instance, African-American staff, at least not when this article was written. Those kinds of, issues. How would they,
Yeah.
is that something we would bring to your office if people in the community wanted to see an RFP issued? What should we do?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, one of the things that happened during our time as a committee was, very early on, was an article came out, and maybe that's what you're referring to, that was showing that the city staff is primarily white, especially people who are in higher positions. So that's something that we talked about extensively was, how can you really trust the city, if the city staff isn't representative? And so that's why we got into talking about hiring practices so much. And so that would really be Laura Orta's office to talk to you about that. As far as issuing RFPs, each department does that themselves. They go through our procurement office, but I think there is room to have conversations about standards of how to write an RFP to attract consultants that will really have a strong equity lens. And I know that we have been putting more and more language in there, but again, there's always room for improvement, and we don't have a standard that's being emphasized across the organization.
And we are in
As
touch
far-
with Laura. We're going to hear from her soon.
Say again?
We're in touch with Laura, and we will have her in.
I can't hear.
Yes, we are in touch with Laura Orta. Orta.
Yeah.
And I think there will be.
That's something we can address with her.
Yes, I think so.
Okay, great. Well, thank you.
And so this is Diana. Hi, Heather. And I had the honor of actually being a member of this group. And so it was the group of 30 of us was a very diverse group of people. From throughout the community, all different ages, all different backgrounds, all different races, ethnicities, abilities. And we were really, mainly, Heather tried to keep us on task, which was sometimes difficult, to really focus on how do we get the message out, right? Or how does the city get the message out to connect to our community? And I looked at it kind of two ways. One is as a member of the community, right? Like, how do I get the information? How do I learn about the Human Rights Commission as a citizen? Or how do I learn about what the mayor is doing or the city administrator? But then there's also the piece of, things like the things you hear in the media or different things like that. And so it's kind of really engaging the community and learning about the different ways that the people in that group and their communities and where they're at, how they want to be communicated with. And so it was very interesting because I think we've talked about it here as a group. How do we advertise the Human Rights Commission? How do we get into the community so that people know we exist? And so it was kind of a learning opportunity for me in two ways, right? Because I never thought about, putting up a flyer in a community center as being something that is so important to minority populations. But there are people that were speaking on this call that I was on for the last year and a half who are saying, yes, we need this. Yes, we need the Zoom calls. Yes, we don't want to go to a podium and stand. You know, we're met with hostility and stuff like that. And so it was really, I mean, I think the recommendations that we came up with, and I can't even say we, because I'm not a person who is typically marginalized at meetings like this. Plus, I'm pretty sassy, as you all know. So I don't have any problem going up and standing at a podium. But I think that, you know, we all know that there are people that are. And so it was just really interesting, but we were really focusing on working on trying to make the city aware that having these meetings in a forum like this is not the way. It's not the only way, and we've got to do better. We've really got to get out there and get into the community. We've got to stop just posting stuff on the website. And so I hope that the work of this group will amplify that. I do think that all of the things you're talking about still need to be addressed, but it wasn't something that we had the bandwidth to talk about or address. It wasn't really our lane.
Well, listen, I applaud your efforts. Participatory democracy, right? Not to be underestimated in terms of its impact on the policies that are created. So it's wonderful, the report and the work that you've done. So thank you. I just thought, oh, well, this must be one pillar of 6 or 7 pillars. So we just have to go off and start those, as you guys have begun. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
I had a question for Heather. I guess I was wondering if you could give our commission recommendations about changes to our own procedures based on what you found. What would be kind of your top 3 suggestions for things for us to consider?
Yeah, I think number one is really getting the word out and doing it in a variety of ways, not just the good old social media, relying on that, because I don't think a lot of people know about the Human Rights Commission and the work that you're doing. So definitely getting the word out, and you know, there's really creative ways that you could be doing that. And then the other way, you know, like this is a little bit hard with this structure because it just kind of structured this ways. Is that, you know, this kind of room setup is intimidating, can be intimidating to a lot of people. It's hard to change this because you have CTN set up in this room the way it is so that it can be done in a hybrid way. So that's the good news, but ideally if there's ways just to make it, I don't know, just kind of a different room setup or to move locations, that would be helpful. I think that's very hard with our boards and commissions for the reasons I said, but maybe thinking through ways like that. And then really, I think I'm going to refer to my report. Let's bring it up. Not my report, but the committee's report. Because there's a lot more detail in here, so I encourage you to read through it if you can. Recruiting people, you know, to be on your board and commission, always looking for that, people who have different perspectives and can provide insight there. And then if you do any sort of engagement event, one thing that I didn't go deeply into is really developing community engagement plans with care and maybe playing a role with that, with the city, a stronger role with that, and with some of the bigger projects that are coming out there. And helping provide that thought as a community engagement plan is being developed, and really thinking about the equity things that you need to be thinking about. So who's disproportionately benefiting maybe from a project or being disproportionately negatively impacted potentially from a project. So just thinking through that with staff, I think would be really helpful.
Anything else? We've got to move on.
Say again?
So we don't have too much time, so. Is there any other questions? Thank you very much, Heather.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate being here.
Thank you. And we still don't have the, okay, so we will go on. This is something we should be talking about as,
Come.
something we should be talking about as we plan things. Keep this
Yes, I agree.
perspective in mind. Yeah.
I think I see another subcommittee coming.
Could be. And you might be on it. You should be on it. But in the meantime, but in the same, we were talking about the council on reparations. You've got the information. It is something that's going county-wide. It's something that looks very interesting, and they want a 24-month commitment from some number of people who are what they call content experts, and I think there's a lot of that in this group. There's a lot of that in the people who are watching this presentation. Please consider applying. If you don't have the information about it, contact the HRC and we'll make sure you get it. Fair? Okay. We talked about complaints. The trespass, I just want you to know that we're still waiting for we're looking for a form that will start a process that changes the policies that are being used for trespass, and how to treat the violations. And hopefully we'll get that next time. Contractor compliance. Tell you what I know. The city of, the non-discrimination, non-discrimination ordinance that the Human Rights Commission enforces not only works for the people who live in the city or people who work in the, well, it also works for people who work in the city. And people companies who contract with the city have to let their employees know that they are covered by the Ann Arbor Human Rights ordinance. Every year, we join with the city's purchasing department to confirm that the contractors are complying and posting the main points of the ordinance and are making the ordinance available. And it's part of our annual report. We've got you've seen the first part. This is the second part. But this is for 2021. Also, pandemic has made everything a little bit slower. But we need you to pass it so that it can be sent to council. Pam Meadows needs to give some explanation about what those numbers mean. I don't think you have to understand the numbers, but you have to understand the process and what we're doing here. Pam, you want to take over?
Certainly. So here's a demonstration of what that report looks like. Colin Spencer sends us the names
Yeah, thank you.
of all of the contractors who do business with the city quarterly. And then he gives us that information annually. It comes in a very concise, hard-to-read spreadsheet.
Mm-hmm.
So I take it and print it, and it looks like this
Oh, my God.
for one quarter. Right? And so what you see is a summary of that. And so I tally the number of contractors quarterly, and then I dissect it from all of the contractors for that quarter who receive a contract totaling $100,000 or more. Then I break that down to those who may receive a contract totaling $1 million or more. And then I look through that to see, of all of those contractors for that quarter, how many contractors are from the Ann Arbor area. And then we just summarize that based on the total amount that the city contracted with and that they expended for that quarter. So each quarter is like a calendar quarter: January to March, April to June, July to September, October to December. And we do percentages of that. I'll just summarize what you've received, and that is of the 4 categories: total number of contractors, those over 100K, those over $1 million, those from Ann Arbor. There are the least number of persons from Ann Arbor that are doing business as a contractor with the city of Ann Arbor. So based on that and the ordinance, we are charged as a commission to confirm that that information is being done per the ordinance. So for example, one of the requirements is that individuals who contract with the city are supposed to post our ordinance and prominently display it somewhere on their premises so that their employees will know their rights. We have relied upon the city to tell us when they do on-sites confirming the work being done, that that poster is prominently displayed. Pandemic kind of slowed us down, but we're going to get back on track and confirm by just checking the Ann Arbor, not all. There's usually less than 10 per quarter who actually have contracts from Ann Arbor with the city. That number is kind of dismal because there are no less than 70-plus contractors per quarter who do business with the city. So of those contractors, less than 10% are from Ann Arbor. So some of the things that we're going to be exploring is, what does that RFP, that proposal, look like that they put out to contractors to do business with the city? Where are they actively posting that information? And then confirming that the contractors are actually compliant with posting that poster, the NDO, the non-discrimination ordinance. So we are going to look into that and then have a follow-up meeting with Colin Spencer, the purchasing person for the city. And that's what you have a summary of, and that's what those numbers reflect. In and of itself, this looks worse than it actually is, and it doesn't really take that long, but it's something that we do to ensure that the city is compliant with our ordinance. And we're just confirming that, and then they then take that same information, present it to council, and then council acts on it. And so we just wanted you to have that information and just let you know that we're compliant with that piece of the ordinance.
Yep. Are there any questions about this?
Yes. Just out of curiosity, on that massive spreadsheet, are the demographics of the contractors noted, like who owns the company?
We do have that's how I know that always every quarter, less than 10 are from Ann Arbor. All of the rest are from all over.
So for instance, the gender and race of those receiving the highest dollar amount contracts, we could go back and assess that?
We would have to dig further for that information because what's sent to us is, for the most part, the name and the address and the contact person and the amount of the contract.
Okay.
However, that is one of the questions that I raised with Colin because I wanted to ensure that we don't know if any of these, for example, are WMBO, women minority business owners. Now, the ordinance doesn't mandate that they do that, but there's a way that they can obtain that information. I've had this conversation with Leslie. Every employer, every contractor is required to complete an annual EEO-1. If you're unfamiliar with that, that lists the 9 categories of whoever makes up that business that specifically identifies gender and race and skill set.
Okay.
And so while they're not
EEO1.
exactly, every employer is mandated to do that annually. And a quick copy of that from those contractors would readily identify that information.
Yeah, very good. Thank you.
Okay. So next step. But this is still, we're going to get another one of these in 2002 because we're falling behind.
Another,
Another
I can't hear you
task.
unless you're in the speaker.
Oh, yes,
microphone.
thank you, I'm talking to real people. You know, let's talk about engagement,
I know.
We are going to get another set of data from purchasing in early spring, I think, for 2022. So we will have, it's still old data, but we will be,
Given all the data.
we'll be getting more data.
But do we
I hope.
know whether the report will include demographics, or should we
No,
make arrangements to go forth and examine those? Like, do we, the HRC, need to examine those, or can we make a request for that?
We for 2022, I think 2022, I think we'll have to do that.
Okay,
Or we'll get more than we get now.
all right.
Would we have to change the non-discrimination ordinance to gather that information, or request that information,
No,
or
this is
require
a-
it?
This is
Connected on
actually,
the EEO1, I think first we should assess,
yes,
yeah, and see where we are.
Yeah.
And to know whether we need to
right.
look at amending that NDO, because, it is concerning when vendors and employees don't reflect the community. You've got to ask why, because I hope no one is going to argue, right? That
Yes.
there are no black qualified people anywhere, right, within reach, or,
Well, one of the ways that I think it may be a little bit premature to amend the ordinance to request that, because includes in the current language is information where we can elicit that without it, amending the ordinance.
Right, okay.
So, for example, a piece of it says if anyone is a federal contractor, they are mandated in our ordinance to engage in efforts to hire locally. And so that's in our ordinance. And so we don't know that, and that's why we want to verify that the poster is prominently displayed. The onus is on the city, who have individuals who are ensuring that the contract is being complied with, and at that time, they have the opportunity to go on site and look to see or request to see where that information is displayed. But if any of them are federal contractors, they are mandated per our ordinance to make efforts to hire locally. As I had a conversation with Leslie, that's a simple requirement. They need only post their positions with the local unemployment office, and they've met that burden or that requirement. We don't know that that's being done. And I think it's presumptuous of us to assume that it's being done without any proof.
what?
So, so we're going to do a little bit more than what we've done in the past, just to ensure that at least we're not taking it as gospel. We're going to substantiate that it's being done, and that is a requirement to be compliant with the contracts that they have.
Yeah, and with an assessment, sometimes you're surprised, right? We also don't want to assume there's a problem.
No.
Before we know.
Can we look at the data that we have for 2021 and simply approve it so that that part could be submitted to city council?
Okay.
We have
A motion?
resolution,
A motion.
a motion to approve it.
I move to present the information as written to the city council.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passed. Thank you. Okay, where are we next? There's a University of Michigan Know Your Rights presentation that we've been talking about for, I think, a whole year now, and we are going to meet on Friday. There will be a meeting to discuss this with the people from the LS&A student government and the, can't think of what it's called, the Title IX department of the university, because they're going to do part of this presentation. They will do, so far, it looks like they will do Know Your Rights for on-campus, and we will do for off-campus. And it'll be a Zoom, and I don't know very much about it, and I will find out on Friday when we start making decisions, but you'll hear more about that. Question for Sarah. Is she still here? Yes.
I
Good. Hi,
am.
Sarah. Sarah,
Hi.
at our last
yes.
meeting, you suggested you were going to be doing some exploring opportunities for us to help with LGBT issues, probably including trans issues.
Yes. So I reached out through, I'm a member of the World Professional Association for Trans Health. And so I reached out through our member listserv and asked if anyone had experience with what would be possible at the local level to affirm trans rights, and had 2 people get back in touch. So the first person, Brandon and I met with her, and they are a psychologist who was very active. Their name is Christina Patterson, in work with the American Psychological Association to have a official position statement against conversion therapy, which I know the commission was very involved with that kind of work last year. And so we talked to Christina, and then after that, Christina also connected me to Melissa Gray, who's another psychologist who's actually based in Ann Arbor. And she was also very involved in this work with conversion therapy, and both of them had done some work lobbying on the state level for different state level legislation. So basically from speaking to them, and Brandon, please add if I'm forgetting anything, basically it sounds like a lot of the work is happening at the state level in a lot of places, and so they were a little bit uncertain about which pieces can actually be translated to local level legislation. Some potential ideas that were suggested was legislation around affirming trans rights around using bathrooms of their choice that match their gender. And so Christina was saying that she knew of some legislation that basically says that if you are building or you have a single stall restroom, it has to be labeled gender inclusive. You're not allowed to make it a single gender restroom if there's only one stall there. And that's sort of like something that was relatively easy to gather support around. And also, they brought in folks who were disability rights advocates and folks who, wanted men to be able to access restrooms that had changing tables, because that's not always the case. So there are a lot of people who benefit from this type of legislation that says that, single stall restrooms have to be gender inclusive. At the same time, Christina acknowledged that, you may want to check with trans folks in your community about whether this is like the highest priority for them. So, in some communities, this may not be appear to be the most urgent need. At the same time, it could be a nice way to kind of build momentum and support and some coalition building around something that maybe hopefully is relatively easy to pass and make some sort of, at least a small difference. The other suggestion was to look into potential sanctuary laws, and these have been passed in the past. I think Melissa thought that there was one on the county level in Washtenaw County potentially around like sanctuary laws around immigration status. But basically sanctuary laws around gender affirming medical care and abortion care. And so these are typically passed at the state level, but she said maybe it would be interesting to look and see if they could be passed at the local level. And basically these sorts of laws would proactively define these types of healthcare as protected and shield people so that they can't be investigated by another state if they come to Ann Arbor to get gender affirming care or reproductive health care. And that these types of laws also will state that like we won't use our law enforcement resources to like investigate these types of behavior in any way, even if they're illegal in other states or wherever that person is from. And so again, it was like a little unclear whether this is the type of legislation that could pass on the local level, but this would be another type of legislation to potentially look into. The other suggestion was, there are a lot of issues that disproportionately affect the LGBTQ community that aren't necessarily LGBTQ specific. So we talked about, I think about a year ago, council was debating whether to decriminalize sex work in Ann Arbor, for instance, and that did not pass at the time, but that is something that disproportionately affects trans folks. Different types of legislation that sort of, may disproportionately affect LGBTQ people. So those were some of like kind of the initial thoughts. They did suggest talking to Equality Michigan as an organization that might have some really good guidance about, what legally is even possible to do at the local level. So that was going to be my next step of folks to reach out to and, invite Brandon and Aiden and Judah and whoever else is interested if anyone would like to reach out to them as well. We'd love to have more folks on board to reach out to more people. So I'll pause there and yeah, excited to hear your thoughts.
Let me make one comment. If something is done at the state level, we don't have to reproduce it at the local level. It already will cover us. Right now, we have better protections than the state by a lot, I'm pretty sure.
Can you be specific?
Especially for trans, but also for LGBT, because for a long time, state didn't have anything. And we were the only ones who covered it, and we tried to cover it very carefully. But things have progressed, and you've brought up a lot of interesting ideas. But I don't think we need to have a reproduction of a law that covers us in the state level, because state trumps local, and anything that's covered by the state, we will cover. But there are lots of things you're seeing and lots of opportunities for us. And one more I want to throw into your bag of possibilities. I was contacted today by the Equity Office, and they are interested in having the Human Rights Commission look at how we can improve the activities and the policies that are mentioned in the municipal equity index that goes to cities every year. Although Ann Arbor appears to have 100 out of 100 points, we want higher. And we've lost some points, some of those extra credit points. It's nice to live in this city.
It is, but and yet, we've got 100 points.
That's right.
And yet we see the huge disparities.
Absolutely.
So you've got a question.
No,
right?
absolutely. So, yes, let's get every... So they're asking us to look at ways in which we can move that score even higher, which really means, the score is nice, but what really means is changing some things even more thoroughly to get more equity.
Yeah, we need more equity metrics.
So
Right.
We will be talking about that too. And
Yeah, and something else I wanted to add, I think it literally just happened today, but the House and Senate, they also passed amendments to the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act of 1976. So that will be basically codifying the rights for the LGBTQ plus community overall as well too. So they are now, to my understanding, will be added into the list of protected classes, so they won't be able to be discriminated against in terms of their jobs, education, housing, and public accommodations. So I think this is, ginormous, great step in everything. And again, even though this is a great step, things still need to happen in terms of working with the overall community to make sure that the implementation is also done properly as well, and as much as possible in a trauma-informed manner. So I think this can also be used to inform our work of how do we still continue to support the LGBTQ plus community, as we wait for this to be more actionable and implemented.
When does it, when that's expected, that vote?
I think it literally happened today, where it's like
It
completely
did.
passed.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll get copies soon.
Yeah.
Gosh, that would be great.
And then-
Excellent.
sorry. I also wanted to add, like, from the conversation, some other notes that were made were also in terms of the education and kind of like the banned books and, just making sure that that is also something to think about when we were talking with, I forgot her name.
Christina.
Christina. She also mentioned school sports, and then she also mentioned just protections and kind of like the public health aspect of HIV and for people who inject drugs, and needle transmissions, and what Ann Arbor can do in that sense to help with providing additional support and access for clean needles for people in a harm reduction manner.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah,
This is,
I think some of those pieces maybe also are collaborations with, school board. I think they mentioned, making sure that sex ed that is in our public schools is, trans and LGBT inclusive. And then like the sports issue, of course, nationally is kind of a hot button issue. So looking at what do we have locally to kind of affirm protections for trans youth in our community. I think I'll follow up on my email to folks who are interested, and maybe we can look at reaching out to Equality Michigan. We kind of have these initial ideas, but not super clear on what's actually feasible or legally possible. So I think that might be the next step in terms of where to focus our energy.
I'm wondering if there's a way, since we've been talking about engagement with the community, if there's a way that we can get this information out once this bill is passed and we know what it includes and what implications it has for us.
It is passed. It passed in the House today.
Today, okay. So if there is something that we can do to make it clear to the schools, for example, to whoever needs to know.
What do you want to advertise? I mean, we could advertise it. I could probably get it posted on the Gym Toy Facebook page.
If we do that, we need to let people know where it is so that everybody can have easy access.
You want just the LGBTQ protections posted? Is that what you're asking?
Actually, what I'm thinking is, because we've got a very good ordinance already, so that we ought to look at that, look at what we've already got, and find out what has it changed. What those,
But,
don't know.
but the ordinance.
I'm not an expert, but my understanding is that it's sort of, I think it brings the state level ordinance closer to what we have here. So I don't know that it will change much in practice at our level, except, of course, I think there's a big psychological impact to marginalized communities of knowing that, okay, these protections are really enshrined and affirmed at every level of my government. And so I think the kind of symbolic aspect is perhaps even one of the more immediate impacts of this. I think my understanding is that based on Michigan Supreme Court precedent, they have read like the sex protection on the basis of sex should also include sexual orientation and gender identity, but it wasn't specifically like explicitly in the law that you can't discriminate based on sexual orientation and gender identity. So this just really firms up that protection that previously was only a court ruling and now will be in state level law. But, you know, of course, our non-discrimination ordinance at the local level already has those protections, which is great.
Huge plus one, and then additionally as well, just for point of clarification, I'm unsure, I'm very positive that I believe the governor has not yet signed this bill, correct? It just passed in the House, so.
Right, it just passed in the House.
It does have to be
Clarification
signed.
as well.
It does have to be signed.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess I'm just not clear what you, because Sarah just talked about a whole lot of things that are not currently protections for LGBTQ plus community members, including the transgender community in the city of Ann Arbor. And so there are things that we could work on as a commission, like doing a city ordinance that mandates all single-stall bathrooms in Ann Arbor businesses to be non-gender bathrooms, right? That's a goal, or that's an item, but that doesn't have anything to do with legislation. I mean, that's not legislation, that's an ordinance, and that's something we put forward to city council.
Right. I'm thinking that, I don't know, because I don't know, I haven't seen exactly what's been passed. But I do know that what is even in our ordinance is not that well known, not as well known as it probably should be. And this would firm up policies that we have already, that are already in the ordinance, like access to the bathroom of the gender that you, that is part, that you feel you are, for example.
So is the ask just once the governor signs the bill, if she so chooses, is just to publicize that this happened, here is the details of the bill?
That might be enough.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know. I think it's useful for somebody to look at what we've got, see if we've got anything extra that we ought to let people know, and let people know that some of the protections that are in our ordinance are now all over the country, or all over the state, rather. And people don't know that. Ann Arbor is a funny place. It's got little pockets of townships all over the city. And we're getting lots of people who are coming to us, even like from Pittsfield Township, with things that we cover, but they don't. Mm-hmm. And they think they should because maybe they have an Ann Arbor mailing address, for example. And this allows a much broader coverage of some of the benefits that we've had, and maybe we're not even using, maybe schools, for example, might not be using all the protections that the ordinance already covers, or that the state now is going to cover. I just don't know, but I think somebody should look at it and see what kind of publishing of this new information is needed, and where it should be published. It's just.
Okay, so what I think you're saying is take the non-discrimination ordinance that we follow for our commission and compare that to the Elliott Larson bill once the governor signs it, and see if there are better protections under Elliott Larson for LGBTQ plus community members. And then if there are, publish that so that our community members know that statewide now, there are better, further, larger protections. And so that people in townships where perhaps our ordinance doesn't cover them will now know that the state laws will cover them even when Ann Arbor City ordinances don't cover them. And I think that's a fine idea. We can do that. I think then that we could post that through our city website, like our own HRC website, and then we could share it on social media in different ways. And I'm sure I could get it published on the Jim Toy website.
I really think that beyond the website and sharing to our social medias, this is going to be all over and already is on MLive, Detroit News, Free, everything. I feel like the word will be sufficiently out there. If we want a permanent sort of resting place for people to know about these added protections, our website should be more than appropriate, and then we can also utilize our existing resources beyond, thanks to Diana as well.
Right, I think it's just an opportunity to highlight that we've had already these protections in place in Ann Arbor. The state is catching up. I doubt that they've exceeded what we have, but it's just another chance to let people know what their rights are, and also that they already had them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I'm thinking that our website is one place, social media is another place. I'm wishing that there was a common place that we thought everybody went to, but I don't think there is. You may be right that the word will get out quickly, but it'll be a lot of pieces of the word. I mean,
we can just directly share what has passed. I mean, the entire bill. But beyond our website and social media channels and partnerships with the city, I'm entirely unsure of where else we would put this or would even have the capacity or authorization to post it. I think beyond just our website, that is the home for things. Like, that is the certified source. And beyond that, we don't have too much of a hand in things.
okay. Well, thank you all. Interesting.
So I do have to run now, so apologies for not being there in person today and for leaving a little early. But I will follow up with those folks who are interested over email again and talk about next steps, and then we'll hopefully have more to present next month.
Thank you very much, Sarah.
Thank you.
Okay. Old business. Okay, we've got two other issues we'd like to cover, and maybe we'll get out early, because it doesn't look like we're going to have the city administrator after all. Okay. One of the things that's until maybe 2 years ago, we were not handling rent or housing very much at all. A little bit of discrimination in housing, but that was not a big area for us, and it has become a much bigger area. We right now, the non-discrimination ordinance deals with discrimination in housing on all the protected classes. It also deals with source of income, and the fact that we have expanded the definition of source of income means that it affects people a lot. It means that, by and large, voucher is the same as money, and you can't discriminate between people who are going to pay it completely with cash, or people who are going to pay it with check, or people who are going to pay it with a voucher. And that's made a big difference for a lot of people. We also now have the Fair Chance Access to Housing ordinance, and that has made a very big difference. One of the things that Aisha has come up with, somebody who wants to
learn from us our experience in Detroit. Keita is starting to expand and would like to.
Plus, I've been contacted with a human rights commissioner from Lansing
Good.
that also would like information about fair chance housing.
Good. And because people are starting to get interested, I did what we probably, well, we really couldn't do it much before. It's only been about a year, but I checked around to see whether people are really profiting, really benefiting from the fair chance access to housing ordinance. And it turns out that they are very much so doing this, that people who are trying to place housing for people who are hard to place because they've had a felony in their past or an incarceration, regardless of how many years it has been since they had this felony or incarceration or what the details were, have not been able to get housing here at all, and now they are able to do that. And I think it's making a big difference, and with source of income, a very big difference. There's now a renters commission, and that commission has contacted us all also to talk to us about what we're doing, but we also need to talk to them about what they're doing. And somehow they're hard to reach. I've been trying to reach them for a month. Well, good, because it's not easy, even though they have a liaison who works for the city. But I think we may have to somehow have a liaison on that commission or some kind of arrangement so that we're in touch, because we're overlapping with them in many ways, and people are coming to us sometimes for their problems. And, I mean, it's just getting confusing, but it's important.
Leslie,
So-
can I ask, what are they
Sure.
monitoring, or what is their purview,
They,
the Renters Commission?
I am not sure, but it came out of the right to renew ordinance and the ordinance that had, yes, that had to do with when you could.
Timing of renewing
the
your
timing,
lease.
yes. But now there are people who are, very interested in lots of rent, and we're getting lots of complaints about renting now. So, and by the way, is there anybody here who knows an awful lot about renting? Anybody who knows a great, who specializes in it or knows a great deal about it? Okay, well, some of us, we're going to have to learn.
Yeah.
I just wanted to give you a heads up because that's coming up very, very definitely. One other thing I wanted to raise with you, and it again has something to do with the presentation that we saw today, having to do with outreach and having a mailing list. Human Rights Commission had a mailing list, something we started in after the tragedy around Aurora Rosser, when it was very difficult. We had a lot of questions to ask and to get answered. We wanted to reach into communities that the city had not reached in before. And we knew we needed an auxiliary mailing list, not something that would replace the city's. At the time, I think the city had 400 people on their mailing list. It wasn't very big. I was never on it, and I'm still not on it. I don't know why. But lots of people aren't on it. If I'm not on it, I mean, I've kind of been active, and I don't know how that happens. But so we've had this mailing list. We used it to survey people. We used it to tell people that there were job openings on commissions that like the Human Rights Commission or the when it was formed, the Independent Citizens Oversight Commission. We used it to let them know that there were town halls. We used them all kinds of things. It was very helpful. So that if something came up, this was a mailing list, we had to promise not to give it to the city. So they would have a mailing, and they would ask us, or we would ask them if we could send it to our mailing list as well. And it made a big difference in terms of peopling the ICPOC, for example, and getting information about what that commission needed in order to be successful. We have not used it for about 4 years, and it is out of date. And I want to know if you still think it's important. I thought it was important at the time, and when the unarmed response survey went out, I was very sorry that we didn't have it, although no one told us that it was going to come out, and no one asked for it. But we would be more proactive if we had it, and if it was up to date. It takes some doing. It means we have to, mail the list out, ask people if they still want to be on it. We have to, go out of our way to make sure that people we know are interested know about it. When we go places, we should tell people. If you're not already on our mailing list and you want to be, please sign up. We don't gather any information except the person's name and their email address. And this is for persons and for groups that we think are specially interested in human rights kinds of issues. That's the only limitation or only requirement. So it's not invasive. Are you agreeing that this is important, or what do you think about it?
I see no harm. I think it's also terribly low maintenance. Again, this is something that we could put on our website. Should we have 100 people in a month, or should we have 100 people in a year? We can just have it auto-populate to our mailing list and then send out emails that we would likely already be sending out to community members or even ourselves anyways. So Denise is the master of all of these things, so frankly, I would default to her expertise, but I think that the actual lift would be pretty light if we were to continue or refresh our prioritization of this.
I guess my question would be, how do we ensure equity on our mailing list? I mean, it would be disastrous if it turned out that we weren't mailing to a representative in terms of diversity. Are we mailing to all age groups? Are we mailing to all income levels? Are we mailing to all ethnic groups? Are we, you know what I mean? Or are we just notifying?
Well, first of all, we would use the cities, and then we would make a separate mailing for things that were sensitive to the group of people who said they were interested in human rights. We would not be checking.
Okay.
I don't think we'd
No. It's not that I expect the city to tell us, but then it would be incumbent upon us to make sure that we reach organizations and groups where we can do a thorough outreach. That's all I meant.
That's right.
It will fall on us to do that part.
Yes, I think that's true.
Yeah, and I would say that I also agree that it's a good idea, but something that I feel like I've been hearing in this meeting in general is that we kind of just need to do more of a strategic planning session on what does our community engagement and outreach look like in general. And I think that will give us a better sense of how can we best utilize this, how can we best format it, how can we innovate it if need be, what are some other locations or people that we also need to reach out to as well. But I think right now, from what I'm understanding, that needs to be a conversation about what does that holistic communication outreach approach look like. But I think this is a component of that, but it needs to be like a little bit more workshopped, I think, overall, as we think about the next steps.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to sign on to that.
Okay. Anything else?
Yes, the ID project.
The ID
next
project.
steps.
Yes. Thank you.
Because what I wanted to address was this notion that maybe on our website, rather than have people who say, have an experience where someone rejects their ID card, rather than have them fill out the complete complaint, we could have something shorter that just gave us where the ID was rejected, right? And if they want to be contacted, they can let us know. But something just to get us there. Because I really think that with that kind of information, we can go and make contact with store owners and managers and, really like address it as it arises. But those forms are intensive.
All we'd need, I think, is, first of all, we'd need to make sure people knew that if they get rejected for a local government
For
issue.
any ID, any government-issued ID.
Any government-issued ID, they need to call us and let us know where.
Or we could put it on the website and it could just be a brief form.
Okay. We could do that.
Because, I have been working with app developers to develop an app that just lets people say, yes, it was accepted, no, it wasn't accepted, and have that shared through the community so that, everyone will know, go there or don't go there until we're able to intervene and set it right.
Denise, is that possible? Is that easy?
Well, we can get a, I can certainly ask IT to look into a short page that you can upload just the major information, the name and address and location and zip code of the store or restaurant or whatever that would not accept the card.
Yep, that's perfect.
Is there something that could be done to provide a flyer with the ID that says, if you have trouble with this?
Sure, but it's, what I love about our ordinance is it's about every ID. It's not just
That's
about
true.
the local government-issued ID cards. So, you might have an ID card from, I don't know, Texas, and no one here has seen an ID from Texas. Well, you can't just reject it. People, when they're uncomfortable or they don't want to follow through with a transaction, will come up with lots of reasons. So, yes, though, I think a flyer, that would be great.
For Washtenaw.
I think I'll talk with the Office of the County Clerk, but really, for the kind of communication that we're talking about and for the folks we need to communicate with, this is really back to the points that the engagement group was dealing with, because it's, it's those trying to convene folks on a Saturday because everybody's working 2 jobs, that kind of push. But I think it's worth it. So yes, I want to do it.
Okay.
So let's do it.
Let's do it.
Seriously, if I can peddle like street signs, I can do a pamphlet.
I think so. I trust you. Okay. I think we're done with this. Are we done with this? I think so. Yes. Yes. Are there commissioner communications, things you want to tell us you think we ought to know?
Yes, I have one, everyone.
Good.
Tomorrow at the Ann Arbor District Library at 6:30 p.m. at the downtown location. Feel welcome to email me for any other associated details. In response to the tragedy that happened in East Lansing on Michigan State University's campus, in collaboration with Moms Demand Action, we are having a town hall on gun safety and reform with State Senator Sue Shink and State Representatives Jason Morgan and Kerry Reingans. Really, this is an opportunity for our community to voice their concerns, share their ideas, and ultimately just say their piece so that they can feel adequately represented in Lansing when these legislators are making their decisions and pushing these proposals forward. If you do not feel comfortable talking or sharing your story, please just come to listen. I think that it will be a really central and major tenet in our healing as we think of our sister community. So please feel welcome to come. It is tomorrow at 6:30 at the Ann Arbor District Library downtown location. It is also posted on the Ann Arbor District Library events website and can be found there. If not, feel welcome to email me.
Do you know if it's going to be televised?
It should be live streamed, I believe. I'm unsure of the televised piece. That's something I can follow up with. And if so, I know that we have temporary live streaming links that can exist for about 2 weeks. But yes,
Great. Thank you.
of course. Thank you. Hope to see some of you there.
Anybody else? If there's no one, yes?
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, folks.
We really didn't have time for guests.